My friend Dr. Debashish for being too kind to introduce me to all of you. It's an absolute pleasure. I also thank Ashish for taking this particular initiative and then starting the whole meeting altogether. Now, what I understand is that the specific one was kept for the reason that we will look at some components of looking at the maritime security for the South Asian states. Now, apparently, there are a couple of states in South Asia which have no maritimity as such, or they don't have access to sea. That's a limitation. But there is something called as the rights of the landlocked nations. You have Nepal, you have Bhutan. They don't have direct access to sea, but nevertheless, the other ones for sure have. So we'll look at some of those components in which India will continue to dominate the discourse, no doubt about it. We also have Sri Lanka. Okay, someone is saying something.
Please, please mute your from your side. Otherwise, the lecture would not be crystal clear.
So the reason I try looking at is three important players we see here, 3 to 4 important players. One being India, then you have Bangladesh, you have Sri Lanka, you have Maldives to an extent, and you have anyway Pakistan, which is very well known. Now there is a difference between what we call as maritime and then what we call as sea. Now there is a difference when we have people like Alfred Mahan who spoke about CPAR. Now CPAR consists of 3 important components. One is international trade and commerce. Second is overseas base, and third one is merchant and naval shipping. Okay, because the Navy constitutes only 1/3 of what he spoke about as CPAR. So it does not anyway talk about. So the ability to go beyond a particular country's sphere of influence and the strength is what makes a country a CPAR. Okay, so otherwise you will just be sort of when we say maritime, you are just a regional part. You are having your sphere of influence. You have certain components that contribute to it, and then you deal with it. Now, why I said this one is also there is always this confusion among a lot of scholars who tend to think that there is this commonality. So maritime, CPAR, continental part. Now all these things they tend to use interchangeably many times, which creates a lot of confusion among young scholars. So I thought it's better that I speak about some of those components so that we will understand how the whole thing fares across here in the Indian Ocean, specifically when we talk about South Asian countries. All of them anyway fall into the Indian Ocean region. So we will look at what are certain flash points that make it very, very problematic. Right now, invariably, one of the formidable power at this juncture in South Asia, specifically speaking about South Asian states, is India. But the commander of the Western Fleet in 1996, Kailash Kohli, once said that history has taught India 2 bitter lessons. One, firstly, the neglect of maritime power that can culminate in a cession of sovereignty. Secondly, that it takes decades to revert to being a considerable maritime power after a period of neglect and decline. Now, what he's trying to say is, once you have lost that connectivity, or once you have lost that art of how you're being a maritime power, or how you are there in the sea or in the water for that matter, it's not easy to get back to. It's like practice. It's like something that comes from generation to another generation. Taking back a little historically, why India, when we had a scenario where we went beyond our own sphere of influence, we went to Southeast Asia, to Java, Sumatra, to all the places, and the Cholas were formidable powers. They were extremely powerful. And being such powerful maritime power and a sea power, in fact, because you went beyond your realm, so you are a sea power. After being such a sea power, then where exactly we lost it? If you go back to a bit of history, you will understand some of those powers that, or those who came to India, they weren't maritime powers, or for that matter, sea powers, due to which it just happened so that they were much more comfortable to look within, because we had a huge geographical space. Because what we are trying to imagine here is a nation that existed prior to 1947, where Pakistan, Bangladesh also were part of India. So they had vast territory, due to which they never felt a necessity that they need to go to the sea, or they need to go to, or need to enter into the sea and then become a sea power, due to which we lost out some of these. That's why subsequently people like Panikkar and others spoke about and said there is a necessity to do something. It's the same preview that I also invoke Admiral Arun Prakash, who said, as the preeminent maritime power in the Indian Ocean, we must possess and maintain a capability for sustained operations in our area of interest. This is what Admiral Arun Prakash said. Now, what exactly is the idea of the being strategic? What are the ends and what are the means that we, if we look in to be a preeminent maritime power, to have that maritime security, right? Now, maritime security is troubled by state actors and non-state actors. You have both the components. So in such scenario, what is the end? What is exactly the mean? Now, the strategic end is to be the preeminent maritime power in the Indian Ocean for India. And the means to bring about this end is a strong navy that can maintain a capability for sustained operations in and throughout the Indian Ocean. That is how we would probably look at every nation. That's what Sri Lanka aspires to be. That's what even Pakistan aspires to be. That's what Bangladesh aspires to be. They may build their own limited strengths in a time to come. That is the issue. Now, where exactly is the maritime problem that we are able to see, or where is the maritime security being located? Now, I said the threat comes from two components. You have the state actors, you have the non-state actors. Right? From time immemorial, the Indian Ocean has been a region that has created different type of problems for a lot of the South Asian states itself. Because whether we say that we have moved and we have become part of the Anglosphere and we have achieved something, and that is the positive way of looking at it. On the other side, the negative way of looking at it, they also pushed us back few centuries to look at it. Now, that is the limitation. What are the type of problems that we are anticipating from the state actors? Okay. Now, when we say state actor, though the whole of the South Asian states, they have their own ways of looking at the problem, and they want to secure their own maritime boundaries and maritimity for that matter. They have a limitation with regard to when we have a formidable player like China in the South Asian region, especially in the Indian Ocean region. Now, that leads to a precarious scenario where maritime security can be hampered. If you look in, some time ago, we had this issue where the Indian Navy chief spoke about, and he said how important it is for India to have a particular military approach to take care of its own maritime concerns. It ended up talking about, because there were fears of the military presence, of the Chinese military presence in the Indian Ocean region, due to which they had to talk about. So he said, Admiral Karambir Singh had said that at any point in time, there are 3 to 4 Chinese research vessels conducting operations such as oceanographic deep sea mining, and a total of about 8 Chinese ships, including anti-piracy escort vessels in the Indian Ocean. Now, these ships include non-military vessels that could be capable of undertaking covert surveillance activities. Now, why surveillance activities? We know very much that the Chinese have their own strategic interests. One. Second, they also have gone beyond their realm, and they have also gone beyond their own comfort zone to all parts of the world. They have not spared any part of the world, including Latin America. They are there everywhere, and they have different ways to deal with each of the nations. Now, there's something smart that they always tend to do is they don't politically interfere, but they make those states to do something what they expect to do. Let me put it this way. Now, recently we had an issue with Nepal, and it's an ongoing issue where Nepal is seen issuing very, very strong statements against India, claiming a territory which India has also claimed, saying that it belongs to me. Now, people are very, very clear and they know that this particular push or this particular assertiveness that's coming from this in Nepal is essentially something that the Chinese are trying to do, where Chinese don't directly get involved with you, but they use arm twisting techniques and they use different people to do this. It is the same thing that because they push their economic interest, they tried sending across their surveillance ships and many other things that they do. But at the same time, they also have their economic activity. They push them into debt traps and other things, which we have seen of late happening to Sri Lanka. It's only now that Sri Lankans are realizing after the whole of the fiasco at the Hambantota. Now, Hambantota, very important because it belongs to the Rajapakshas, and the Rajapakshas hail from Hambantota. Now, Mahinda Rajapaksa's son, Namal, actually is an MP from Hambantota. That's why they personally wanted to take care of it, and Hambantota is being developed like that of Dubai. But now, Mahinda Rajapaksa's brother, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, understands that there is a necessity to expand themselves and not get stuck with the Chinese because they would exploit them unreasonably beyond a particular limit. Now, this is something that we see here. But on the other hand, you also have their presence in Bangladesh, you have their presence in Maldives, you have their presence in Sri Lanka, you have their presence anyway in Pakistan, which is a known factor because they are all-weather friends. And India feels concerned about this particular component. This is one side of the story that we are trying to look at. Now, the other side of the story is essentially about the violent non-state actors trying to trouble the states in the South Asian region. Okay. Now, nevertheless, we have seen around 2008 attack that happened where maritime security was a major primal concern, and we had an attack from the sea, and very much the reason was very clearly known that you attack a financial capital of a nation that almost attacks the heart of a particular nation. So if you attack Mumbai, then Mumbai being a financial capital get affected. So you will not have foreign direct investments coming in. Once you don't have foreign direct investments, India's growth as an economic power goes down. Once the economic power goes down, we start getting weakened, and then we will not be in a position to push ourselves for international role in terms of asking a permanency to the United Nations Security Council. We have many other regions too, right? So these are certain limitations that they think can be managed when you push a non-state actor to do. Now, Pakistan did this one on India, and this was terrible. How do you manage actually a 7,000 odd kilometers of your coastal coast? How do you manage that one? So there is a limitation on that one. So there is the limitation is that you yourself cannot be in the forefront to deal with most of the problems. So you need the locals, you need the people to take initiatives to make sure that they become our first line of intelligence. It's they who deal us from there. Okay. Now, why do we require Indian Ocean, or for that matter, the maritime security to be so strong? If you look in all our energy security is dependent on the maritime component of it. Whether we get our energy sources from there, on top of it again, when we also send back, because the crude oil comes from West Asia or Middle East that people talk about, and then it gets refined in Mumbai, in Mangalore, and few other places where we have refineries, and they also have to get distributed subsequently. Now, how does that happen? How, if we don't have maritime connectivity, or if we don't secure our maritime concerns, how do we succeed in doing it is also a major case of concern that we need to address while we are talking about it. Now, the activities from the sea is so high. The maritime security concern becomes so important if we look in, because of our strategic priorities. And we need to build our own military capabilities and partnerships to make sure that we have some sort of control over it. Now, India has been doing with the so-called Vanilla Island nations, if you remember. We do it with Seychelles, Madagascar, Mauritius, then Comoros and Maite, all these Indian Ocean littoral states. We have many of them. We continue to do it because the Prime Minister somewhere believes, the Indian Prime Minister believes, security and growth for all. That was our way of putting it across. That's why the Indian Ocean Rim Association, for that matter, an intergovernmental organization that all of us are aware, have been having intergovernmental sort of dialogues. You have dialogue partners being there, and a lot of them have come in one or the other way to make sure that India is secured at the sea. Now, I'll come back to India again, and then we will look at what are actually the maritime security concerns for Sri Lanka, for that matter. Because what happens is when Indian scholars tend to speak, there is this particular component of the overwhelming what is the importance being given to India, and many of the scholars from different parts of the world as well as from South Asian states tend to feel that we make it almost like an India-driven region, or we make it to look like it's all India about South Asia, nothing else. So rather than falling into the same trap, I rather thought we'll concentrate some about the type of maritime security issues that are dealt by states like Sri Lanka. Now, while we talk about what are the maritime security concerns that Sri Lanka has, they have the major concerns with regard to piracy. Recently, in the month of March, I was there in the month of February, rather. I was there in Sri Lanka. I was also associated with the defense think tank, the think tank directly under the Ministry of Defense. I also happened to deliver a lecture for the tri-services people there. I was just trying to talk to them. Now, piracy seems to be one major concern. Terrorism, after the Easter attacks, terrorism has become a reality for them, which for a long time they were denying, because they also were in that larger garb of secularism, and then they did not want to speak in public, and they thought there was some sort of intolerance that was happening in the nation. But subsequently, with the Easter attacks, they have understood that terrorism is a case of concern. And then you also have territorial disputes that are existing, which is also essentially with India. At Kachatibu, we have problem, they have problem with us, and this is a common issue that we are able to see, where Indian fishermen normally move over to the Sri Lankan waters, and then they end up doing it. Why exactly this particular issue, if you ask me, that Indian fishermen know it very well. With very much clear knowledge, they actually move into the Sri Lankan waters, and then they do this one. The other issue that Sri Lanka always highlights is essentially of the trawlers that Indian fishermen use, which cuts the nets and other things of the others. So it makes it very, very problematic. So you also have these territorial disputes, which make it very, very problematic. You have trafficking, and then the other important component, which is also the non-traditional security part, which is probably taking the greater pie, is also something to do with what is a natural disasters. Right now, that's a case of concern that we have, where maritime security can be disturbed even with your natural disasters. Now, that's the case with Bangladesh, which we have seen often happening there. Now, every country, when you have to take care of your maritime security, have to push themselves with regard to naval modernization. Now, everybody will not be in a position to spend so much money on that one. Like India can certainly do that, but unfortunately, it's also not something that it has succeeded for a long time. Now, Sri Lanka also released something called as the Navy's Maritime Strategy 2025, where it spoke about in the policy circles that there is a necessity for naval modernization, and it has to tackle certain problems that are essentially coming up in a critical scenario. That was their idea, because one, you need to take care of your shipping routes there where the maritime security is warranted. Without that one, there is no possibility at all. Second is, Sri Lanka is also vulnerable at the maritime realm with regard to the human arms and the contraband trafficking via sea routes. Now, that is another major concern that Sri Lanka thinks that has to take care of it, because for a long time they suffered with the Tamil Eelam, which we are all of us are aware, that is LTTE, because they use the maritime component for trafficking. In fact, that's how finance came in, weapons came in, and it became a major case of concern, where even the drug was a pathetic issue. I am sure all of you are aware, in Hyderabad, some time ago, we had a lady who was raped, who was a doctor, and she was raped, and subsequently, when people were enraged with the type of brutality, because she was burnt and she was left on the roadside. when the brutality was at the peak, then the police actually tried something dramatic, in the sense they did an encounter by killing them. Now, what happened was, when this particular killing was happening, Gotabaya had visited India. And the joke in Sri Lanka was that Gotabaya Rajapaksa has gone to India, and then Indians are also following what Gotabaya does in Sri Lanka. Now, that is how Gotabaya Rajapaksa dealt with the drug traffickers who are using the maritime component of Sri Lanka in a very, very strong way, because Sri Lanka has become some sort of a transit point for mass-scale drug dealers. Now, here where they were fearing, because 95% of Sri Lanka's drugs, they think that it happens through the maritime connectivity or through the maritime this thing, because that's how it becomes a transit point. Now, you also have other major issue, which is not so important from the security, in the sense the military security component is also the illegal, unreported and irregular fishing. I also was interviewed by the Ceylon Times, and in which they were asking about money laundering as a major case of concern in the whole of South Asia. How maritime component is used in and it's dragged into that one. It is an important component, no doubt about it. Now why I mentioned about irregular fishing with regard to illegal, unreported and irregular fishing by the local as well as foreign boats is for the simple reason that, one, they fear that the critical marine ecosystem gets destroyed. That is one. Second, it also causes depletion of the marine resources. Right, one in way back in 2013 itself, there was this particular report that Sri Lanka essentially depends on a lot of components with regard to the maritime, because sea is something that they engage themselves. Being an island nation, they have nothing else to concentrate much about. It's a small nation; they have their own problems with regard to, but they continue to do this. Now, the other component is, one, they have allowed a 99 years lease, that is with regard to the Hambantota, which I said already, to the Chinese. Now, this has divided the nation into different way. One, they say, yes, Hambantota, being the south part of the nation, is getting developed. It's becoming like the modern Dubai and all these things on the one hand. But on the other hand, there are these issues that has divided the nation, where they think, what if China is using Sri Lanka for the military purpose? What if they are trying to destabilize others, due to which Sri Lanka's relation with other nations, including that of India, gets troubled? Now, this is the problem. Now, US on the one hand also tries to push to counterbalance Chinese presence by trying to be there in and around. But they also have their own problems, where they don't agree with regard to Sri Lanka's behavior. They keep pushing it up in the UNHRC and all these places, and it makes it very, very problematic for them. But unfortunately, the Sri Lankan Navy is trying to do whatever that is possible, but they have their own maritime security issues, as I told you, from illegal drugs to the human trafficking, to all sorts of problems that are happening. Now, this is also partially case with regard to Bangladesh also, no doubt about it. Now, Bangladesh has its own typical type of problems. Rather, I should put it in that way, because on the one hand, it's also an extremely and densely populated region, but also suffers from issues such as terrorism and other things that are emanating, and people using some of these issues into the sea. Now, Bangladesh also has good amount of cooperation with China, and it troubles, or it becomes a major case of concern for India. Now, having said these things, what then can be done with regard to managing the region? What are the possible ways that we can think of managing? Now, one, how do you really manage when you have problems with regard to are there possibilities or venues for cooperation is the question that I'm actually trying to put up with. In the sense, I'm trying to ask, is there a possibility, let's say, on issues of terrorism for South Asian states to come? We have seen recently when the COVID-19 happened, the Prime Minister of India tried having a video conference. When you tried having a video conference, though everybody represented, but the people at the top level represented with regard to all the other nations except for Pakistan. Pakistan spent a special officer who was close to the Prime Minister, because the Prime Minister was also handling the health ministry. So he himself would not be there. And it would have made a lot of difference rather than doing this one, because Pakistan is also troubled with regard to its own maritime security. It's not that it's not troubled. The way they are struggling with regard to Balochistan, the way the Baloch rebels try troubling them is also something to do with. It's not that always India is alone, or Sri Lanka and Bangladesh are the ones which have maritime security issues emanating from terrorism. Pakistan also faces this one, but unfortunately at times it doesn't get reported. But Pakistan also seriously faces this as a major problem when we look at with regard to how to manage this one. So is there a possibility of cooperation with regard to the maritime security of the South Asian nations? What are the possible flashpoints that we are trying to look at? One, now that we have a problem with regard to, let's say, the nations concentrating on the health issues. Okay, now public health becomes a major component of spending. On the other hand, you also have the continuous problem that's being exploited by the terrorist organizations. The other day, last evening, in fact, I had with the Lieutenant General, I was sharing a webinar in which we spoke about how ISIS and many others are trying to activate their own regional chapters, trying to activate certain organizations which have been affiliated to ISIS or Al-Qaeda or a few other ones, and then trying to tell them that this is the best time that you can think to get involved, or this is the best time that you can make use of the availability of an opportunity where the states are actually concentrating on the traditional sessions. So this is the issue that we see in this particular problem. Okay. Now, on the other hand, as I told you, that is there a cooperative framework that we have as such? There is none. There is none, but we talk about it because ARC hasn't been very successful with regard to. But on the other hand, it also has its own limitations. Whenever we talk about terrorism, the moment we bring up terrorism as an issue, it simply divides the nations, and there is no possibility of coming in into the problem itself. Now, having said these are certain concerns that most of the South Asian states look forward to, what are the limitations that, or what are the factors that can bring us together? One, I said about terrorism, where without probably Pakistan, we can still think of a framework that can come in, like how Oli Weaver, or for that matter, Barry Buzan have spoken about regional security complexes. Now, why not regional security complexes that can be used for the maritime security? When these nations which are troubled at the maritime realm, there is a possibility that can certainly be done. That is factor number one. How do we look at or create a regional security architecture? What can be the common points that can bring us? One, trade that we looked at. Second is transnational crimes. Third is